Didn't he leave about a year ago?
December.
Must've been bored at home.
I'm fine with that.
Yep.
How are we doing, sir?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Hello, Mark.
Morning.
Morning.
This is one.
Good, really good.
I didn't. It's probably a little more liberal than this one. What do you want to get away Well, there's 2.4. He said it's on 2.5. He said.
Well, folks, it's 9 o'clock. We have this pledge
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
motion for the minutes yet? Yep. With the one correction?
The amount on the contract, right?
Yep.
And I will second
All in favor?
that.
Aye. Engineer, 9 o'clock.
59th Street Trail, just before Lynn County Line Bridge project. The contract that was signed last fall for that project, I think it was. The late start date's actually yesterday. Talked to the contractor yesterday. He's a little behind, it's gonna be at least 2 weeks before he gets it started, but we typically do a resolution to temporarily close those roads while they're under construction. I have a resolution here to close that road throughout 15th, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. He's not worried about getting it done in a timely manner, it's just Shorty's help and being a little behind on some other projects at the moment.
Where is 59th Street?
59th Street Trail, he's, Dave Wilhelmy and Larry Weir own pasture on both sides of that bridge, just for the Lynn County line.
Okay.
Project from the other church over to Lynn County, the last bridge on that project.
Okay. We're gonna have that done, like I said before, harvest.
I'm hoping so. Like I say, it's, you know, it would easily be done if it starts this month. So,
All right.
Make a motion that we approve that bridge closure on 59th Street Trail.
All in favor?
resolution.
Resolution.
Okay, Brimmer, aye.
The latest from the federal transportation bill, that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, many people have called the IIJA bill. Within that, there's a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, a discretionary grant for some street road improvements. One of the requirements to be eligible for that fund is that all entities have to have a local safety action plan. The DOT, as well as the Service Bureau, are working together to put a grant together for all 99 counties. To have a local safety action plan. There's been a few counties in the past that have done a local safety action plan, more or less looking at incorporating some safety activities from the type of planning. Those don't quite meet the current requirements for the new federal bill. What I have is a resolution asking that the County Board of Supervisors will commit to achieve significant declines in roadway fatalities with that local action safety plan, working towards zero fatalities on highway projects. So trying to incorporate things if the funding makes sense for certain safety activities. Trying to get those numbers reduced by 2030 from where they are now, and then getting them even reduced more by 2050 from where they would be in 2030. The resolution is just a support from the Board of Supervisors from more or less encourage and support that action plan. Certainly the action plan would come before you as it gets prepared, after it gets prepared. But that grant has two categories. One, you can use it for putting your plan together, which you need the plan to do any type of activities, which is the other part of the grant. Right now, with what the County Engineers Association with the DOT's assistance is that this application, although it's 80% federal money, 20% match, the 20% match can come out of the safety plan fund, and that would potentially be a net zero cost to whoever that be. So,
Which is replacement of the one program basically that they had, correct, before? Your Brady program?
This is a separate new, I mean, there is a bridge fund, part of the infrastructure, researching a little bit more on that. There's also actually two bridge parts. So I guess there's money that has coming just like we have kind of seen in the past. I'd say past because it was 80-20.
Right.
There's a new bridge portion that has to do with larger projects and actually includes rehab, whereas the past program has always been just replacement or major rehabilitation, type replacements. Whereas this current rehab could be possibly just overlays, if I'm understanding things right. There's some railroad crossings. There's some additional programs within that total federal transportation bill that we're going to learn more of. County Engineers Association has actually put together a committee that's going to try to stay on top of that. They're actually looking at also hiring a grant writer position within the organization that we can stay on top of some of these federal programs. The way the current federal administration is handling some of this infrastructure spending is kind of on a competitive discretionary basis. And if that's going to be a trend for the future, then we really need somebody that can stay on top of deadlines, information, and other things along those lines, better than just relying on a few county engineers within a committee to try to stay on top of that. The resolution would be twofold. One, that you're supporting that committee, and the DOT to put a plan together, and that you will help support that as we do future projects. If that sounds acceptable to you, I have a resolution.
So we do it all one motion then? Or do we need to?
This resolution is specific to the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants, and it would encompass the support and development of that action plan.
So we need a motion to approve this.
I do.
That's my motion, whatever he said.
Second, resolution,
Primer, aye.
Pearson, aye. Seaman, aye.
I should have to repeat that. Heading, it's under stuff.
One is easier to type that one, get that one.
That's all I had.
Robert come in yet?
Yeah,
I have.
like he actually, when I talked to him last week, he thought he'd be after that, so that should be next week.
I haven't talked to him yet, but the farmer that's got the fairground on the east side, me and Randy talked a little bit about it, you can stage stuff there.
Okay.
You won't care. And then that, road by Kenny Craig, I'm gonna call Randy to check that out today. It's gonna get 90 degrees, maybe we talked about how it gets slimy.
Mm-hmm.
Might have to go to the sand, it's gonna get today or tomorrow. Not bad yet.
Thank you, Sue.
Gene.
Short and sweet here. Just approval to bring on a couple drivers down there and Vibrant. Dino left us in December. He come back last week and found out they had me out on pay for him. So good. Yeah, because they both have their Class C with passenger endorsements, so it's kind of a no-brainer to bring them back in.
So moved.
And I would second both of them.
Yeah. All in favor of hiring Don Malloran?
McHugh.
And Clyde Lennon?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Good day.
Aye.
Morning, everyone. Kyle Helen Engineering, submitted a variance on behalf of, I'm gonna butcher his last name, so I apologize, Leo is involved. He owns the property, to the northwest of Blairstown. There's an existing, 1 acre tract there now, and he would like to split off another 1 acre tract to allow his grandson to build, new residence. As you guys know, Benton County subdivision ordinance kind of restricts that unless we go through the full process. Therefore, we're requesting a variance in regards to some of the requirements, mainly the preliminary plat, associated documents with that. Mark has indicated that because the grandson will not be engaged in farming activities with the family, that a land use change will be required, and that would come after, upon the variance request approval. They would come back to the board and ask for that land use change, and then after that fact, the next step would be the review of a preliminary plat. So I guess today what we're asking for is, because there's no public improvements in regards to water, sewer, roads, any of that, we're just asking for that variance so we can kind of keep moving forward with allowing the split so his grandson can get ownership and build a new home.
I'll make a motion that we approve that variance.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well,
By resolution.
oh,
Both of them. this signed today? Because with Myron's resolutions, I wouldn't change the numbers on it
No.
now.
No, as long as it's
Before you get it recorded.
it's not a critical for us, so,
Okay, perfect. I'll get this changed for you.
great, thank you.
Yeah, don't sign them.
Okay.
Because Myron did the two before.
I'm a little confused on this. It says the northwest quarter.
It's the northwest quarter of section 25, or excuse me, 11, so if you think of this as the center of the section, he owns the quarter right.
It also shows you the 80 picture.
Good morning.
The northwest corner shows you.
It's the northwest quarter, and if you think of a section, you know, you've got your square section, and then you've got your quarters. So he owns the whole northwest quarter. He's wanting, there's an existing acreage here, and he's just adding one right next to it. The road actually goes down the center, running east. Okay.
Yeah. I was just confused. Okay, Tom.
Next one we have, and I apologize, on the bottom of the map, you have the same name of Leo. Using the Benton County website, I was just moving around in there and I didn't click on this, but the property is located on Highway 21, basically right across from the Dollar General store in Geyser. It's right on the county line. He's in the northwest fractional quarter of section 18. Matt Corbin bought that acreage about a year or two ago.
Yes.
From Sandsman, and at that point in time, Sandsman only wanted to give up the minimum amount, which was 1 acre. He's been in communications with Sandsman, and they have agreed to sell him additional property, mainly from the existing acreage south to their property line, and then potentially a little bit to the east, kind of forming an L-shaped property. Mr. Corbin would like to expand the farmstead just because he'd like to have livestock. I was pretty liberal in my drawing there. I showed about 2.5 acres that would go with that. They've agreed to purchase up to that amount, but he may not, it may be reduced there. So I just wanted to give you, as the most it would be, but it's potentially going to be less. In the request and the variance, we're requesting basically a waiver of all the requirements with the preliminary and final plat, just because once this is all said and done, Corbin will own everything together, and he will also record a restricted covenant that would tie the existing parcel A, which is at acreage now, with the new parcel, so they can't be sold separate. The only way to eliminate that restricted covenant would be, again, to come in front of the board and get that approved.
Sure.
Okay?
So you shoot for about 5 acres more?
No, the most he would take would 2.5 acres more.
Okay.
Right now he has 1 acre.
Okay.
The most he would take is 2.5, but he says he knows how far east he wants to go. There is a tree line on the east side of his acreage right now, and I think he wants to get outside of that drip line a little bit. So he's probably not going to take in the full 2.5 acres.
Okay.
Now this would, in regards to the plat of survey, it would not come back in front of the board. It would go straight to Mark and the auditor for review and approval, and then go straight to the record. Okay. Thank you.
I have no problem with it.
Well, either, I was up there and looked at it, so.
And I know where it's at.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
Yeah, David.
Second. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, resolution. By resolution.
Kramer. Aye.
Seaman,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
aye.
Thanks, Mark.
I'll get the sign before they.
It's no rush on our part.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, 9:15, annual land use hearing from Afon. What do you got today, Mark?
Well, the only thing I have that is new from what we did last week is there was discussion about whether or not you guys had authority to deal with this matter in respect to the state law that was adopted in 2020. It was called the 2512, the new regulation. And I know that you asked Dave Thompson to issue an opinion about it. Dave called me yesterday afternoon, and I know you guys know that he had another commitment today. And but he did ask me to tell you basically that he has looked into it, and the reason I know that is we've spoken back and forth a couple of times about the matter at least. But he called me yesterday afternoon. On Friday, he had found a case that is extremely similar to a case the case that we're talking about here the last few weeks in respect to what Amana Farms Incorporated wants to do on that land. That case basically involved an operation that was in Sioux County, excuse me, and some folks basically appealed to the Board of Adjustment because of the fact, the very thing that came up here last week, whether or not the Sioux County Board had authority to even hear the case. They're extremely similar, but the bottom line is, the long and the short of it is that, and it's similar to what I stated here last week, is the Amana Farms project is subject to our ordinance because of the fact that the manufacturer, where they're getting the material that they want to bring to Benton County to put in that tank is the byproduct of a manufacturing plant. It is not the byproduct, it's not an agricultural byproduct. And so therefore, the facility that they want to build, the storage facility that they're asking for approval for, according to our ordinance and according to the Supreme Court case that was reviewed, that type of facility is not considered to be primarily adapted for agricultural purposes due to the fact, yeah, it's going to sit on in conjunction with what has been a farm, but they want to parcel off 3 to 5 acres. It no longer at that point is actually an agricultural facility. Bottom line is, long and the short of it is that it's not primarily adapted for agricultural purposes, so it is subject to, in Dave's opinion, our ordinance, your review, your approval, basically. So I told him I'd just summarize that for you, basically, for today, because I figured there'd be some people here that probably would want to hear some information on that. He could not be here today. But anyway, that's long and short of it. That's all I have that's new. If there's anything else or anybody wants to say anything, obviously feel free. But the proposal is what we've reported stays the same.
So they haven't asked to slow down the permit?
John McGrath called me yesterday to ask me basically, if indeed if you wanted to table it further or whatnot, what that would involve, but I don't know the outcome of, what they've decided or anything about that, so. It's still on the table right now for your consideration, and you have it on the agenda so you can deal with it accordingly. They haven't officially asked me to do anything else at this point, no.
They haven't.
No. The last I knew, he was going to speak to you.
He did.
He did, okay.
He did. So the way I had it, not so much me, the way they're talking about, and I'm putting words in somebody else's mouth here, since they're not here to say this. But I threw this out here, that if they were willing to bring this product up here on after the beans are harvested and applied it to the fields, then everybody can see by their nose how that's going to be. And if it wasn't so overpowering, everybody could, in the neighborhood could get along with it. I'm sure it's going to stink for a day. I mean, last night I smelled the cattle out west of me 2 miles away, plain as day. But if it ain't overpowering and it disappears, then the whole problem that we come into they meet all the criteria to put that tank there. They meet everything. So we have to have a good reason why they can't, and I guess they kind of told me that smell is not a reason.
Who told you?
I mean, it's just the way it is. There is no law that says, you know, a cattle lot or hog lot, as long as they qualify for so many feet away from a residence.
There are other factors. So.
Well, I look at the truck traffic. That's what I'm worried about, the truck traffic.
That's what I'm worried about, is the truck traffic.
But what I'm looking at is that if they apply this, you know, and it really is overpowering, we're all on the same page, I guess.
But then who determines what's considered overpowering, because that's very subjective. So at that point, who makes that decision? And the issue is that this is a commercial, this isn't ag, they're to make money. And they're not gonna turn someone down and say, oh no, we can't open it up with tank because we promised to only do it so many times. They're gonna fill it and empty it as often as they want. So that can be continuously the odor. It's not just gonna be one day out of the blue. So this is not just gonna be a here and there once in a while. So it's not just odor, it is the truck traffic. And this is an opportunity for you guys to make a determination of what you want this county to build. Just because someone checks off the boxes doesn't mean that's how we want our community. So that's what I beseech you as well.
I'm curious how much truck traffic is already there, because just to the north is a truck repair shop.
But they're not coming down our roads to go down different fields. They're getting on Highway 30. That's not a destination. They're gonna leave there and they're not gonna wanna get on 30
There's
because
still
it's a
truck
pain in the butt.
coming in and out, right?
But not on the gravel roads, not past our homes.
Yeah, on a truck repair, they're going just right to his, which is less than an eighth of a mile or an eighth of a mile or something also.
And then going back on 30.
And again, putting words in somebody's mouth, from what John had indicated to us, financially it makes no sense to fill the tank, empty the tank, fill the tank, empty the tank. They fill the tank when the ground is frozen. They empty it after the ground is thawed so they can knife it in. They usually then go from the producer of that product, the fertilizer, directly to the fields. Who is to say that it comes to the fields around the tank? It's going to go to whomever purchases that product, correct?
It's gonna come from the tank.
Once it comes from the tank, it will go to fields. That is correct.
Yes.
If nobody purchases that, other than Townsend's, who evidently is going to use about half of it, then it may be transported to other counties. Not
Then the
by
question
gravel
is,
roads.
beseech you, why don't they just have another site in Iowa County? Or perhaps in Main County where the other part of the manufacturer is coming from, there'd be even less transportation. So for me, I feel that they're just finding a dumping ground in Benton County because they think Benton County is gonna oversee any regulations or anything. It's just a lot easier.
I don't know that that county's a lot easier.
He
This is,
said that at the last meeting, it was frankly too hard. He didn't wanna go through that much of a process to
County.
get it in Lynn County.
Yeah, and my question is, why not
sure,
build more in Iowa County? Why aren't they?
their prerogative, obviously, to build wherever they choose.
This
There
is
has
a
to be a
business,
reason.
Rick, so if they got the opportunity, they're gonna fill that tank 3 times a year and get rid of it 3 times a year. They're not just gonna fill it once. I mean, it's like, all right, you own semis, you got a load in California and that's it for 3 weeks. If you got another load, you're in business to make money, you're gonna send.
But that is our business, is.
Well, that's gotta be their business.
Right. And again, all we can do is,
Okay,
the
I'm
gentleman
just
first
pointing
word,
out, I
that
feel
it's,
they're
that it's not economically feasible to put it in the tank, take it out of the tank, put it in the tank, take it out of the tank, you know, time and time again. It's economically feasible, you know, probably not to even have the damn tank, but you gotta do something in the wintertime. They can't transport it south, obviously. Be nice if they could. So, yeah. Well, I had the same conversation with Dave Thompson, and pretty much came to the same conclusion, but he said he could, you know, if there was questions regarding his, you know, analysis or rendition of that, you know, ordinance, state, House file, whatever it is, he could likely come in later this week to explain it. I don't think it's gonna change the facts.
It's still on us.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Right.
And I guess what I thought I had acquired, that they were gonna wait until the application later this fall to see how it goes, how it applies. Because I know one of the comments was that they didn't wanna look at the tank. Well, the more I start thinking on this project, well, everybody's got grain bins nowadays from after having a storm, you know, and of course the bins that got rebuilt are bigger and better and taller, and right now they're shiny. This is a harvester. I mean, to me, it's not an eyesore. You know what Wheelers look like. They had the 4 silos, and of course they're gone now. They had the slurry store right by Highway. You know, it wasn't an eyesore.
I didn't make that.
I know you didn't, but I mean, there was comments, they didn't want to see that. So I guess I look at the two things, the smell and the road traffic. That's what I worry about, and the road traffic's the one of it. You know, so if we got the smell, that's bad in October when they put the stuff on. Well, we're all on the same page, we don't want it then. But I'm trying to get ahead of this because he is within his rights, all the check marks are marked. He can do this. And you know, smell ain't the factor right now, according to what we have in the county.
There
The
is
only
no-
thing is the roads. So I guess there's 2 ways we can do this. We can table it again until later on this fall, on this permit. I'll take your advice on that, or we can vote on it today.
And the third option has to do with the dirt road. You know, obviously, if we pass it, I want it in writing that Benton County is not responsible for any maintenance on that road. And we can mandate that they only use that road from Highway 30, on and off. So they're not tearing it up going south.
Can you also provide a request for a vegetative barrier to help with odor, to request that they do that?
It's been done before. It wasn't for odor, it was
Right.
for visual reasons. Now, the problem would be if they don't do it. We don't have a way to go back.
And that's my whole problem. Once this is here, there is no oversight and they can do whatever they want. And like you said, they may change where they're going all the time. It's either we deal with this now or we're kind of stuck with it.
We had, we'd given approval for a land use change, and that was also to have some trees put up for the neighbor's sake. I honestly don't know if they ever did. You, Mark?
Well, one of the problems is it's difficult to establish a condition because our ordinance doesn't have a section that talks about special conditions and then being able to enforce that. You could ask, and if indeed folks want to be a good neighbor, they've offered and they've done that. One thing about the odor, and I brought it up in the initial hearing about all of this, is that if Thompson's or whomever owned that land, it could be somebody else here. Somebody wanted to put a hog facility there, there'd definitely be an odor there, and they're gonna pump pits same time of year. Basically, things are gonna be happening. As far as these guys and their odor, with no odor regulations, there's nothing there to enforce. So that's, that's just, I'm just bringing it up as a point because of the fact that this is actually farther away than what a hog confinement could be from an inhabited residence of some size. And so from that standpoint, everybody talks about it, but this is Benton County, rural Benton County, and agricultural operations like
This
that.
isn't agricultural, this is commercial. So
I understand
you should have
that.
more of a say of what comes in your
I
community in regards to commercial.
I understand that. But as far as the stipulations and those kind of things, being able to enforce that, you could ask them to be a good neighbor. As far as your question about tabling it, that really is up to you guys. If you want to table it, you certainly can. If you want to act on it today, vote on it, obviously do that too.
I'm a little confused. They're in Iowa County. They've got several tanks in Iowa County. They're not going to Lynn County. They're not going to Powashik County. Why are they coming here? Why is Benton County the county they're coming to? I don't understand it. It would make sense to me for them to continue to build tanks in Iowa County.
John McGrath sat here and said, well, they didn't have any more need for it there in Iowa County.
Sell it
That
to
was his
whoever.
explanation.
Sell it.
Yes, that
The
was
need
his.
is the same as Benton County. Sell it.
That was his explanation. I haven't heard any other explanation about that. Now, as far as the Lynn County spot, you heard what he said. There were other regulations, and those involve structures and things like that. And obviously, there are other regulations in Lynn County that we do not have. And he sat there and said that as well. So,
Highway 30 is the perfect avenue for coming out here. You get to Powashik County, you're gonna go down, the interstates, 380 to 80.
It's actually easier for them to get to Powashik County than
And
it
they're already
is.
doing it, and they already have that
How's it
trucking
easy?
system.
And I don't agree with that. Coming straight out, Cedar Rapids on Highway 30 was 4-lane.
Why would
To
they?
go down to 380 to that mix master that's under construction 99% of the time, it seems like, to get on 80 to head west, that is not easier. We go through there every day with the trucks. It's not easy. So,
You bring up a farmer wanting to put in a hog confinement, how many gallons is that though? We're talking,
hog confinements is surface applied, is that correct?
I'm just talking about gallons, or are we talking?
gallons.
I understand that. Yeah, I have no clue.
Are we talking
I don't-
10,000 gallons versus 1.5 million gallons, or what? I don't
It's
know.
gotta be a lot more.
It is.
My neighbor's got one too, it's going back up again. It's gonna be rebuilt, but it's gotta be big, cause I think the pit's like 10 or 12 foot deep.
You don't
6 foot
get,
across.
you don't get 20 truckloads for 20 days straight. That's the example he said. He gave us
Do you
was,
have confinement on your
I
property?
did, yes.
Okay. How many times did it get emptied per year, roughly?
Hopefully twice a year.
Curious, didn't know. And surface applied around the area,
We knifed it in,
did you? That's cool.
in our own ground.
So my other question, and I wasn't at the first meeting because we didn't know anything about this. I assume it was discussed, but because there is a creek within a mile away, is that DNR approved permitted that we have that? Okay.
Yeah, the DNR does regulate this, and they do have to have the containment system built around
Gotta have a
it.
dike all the way around it to hold the gallons. Gotta be engineered.
They have an engineer out of Kansas that's been working on this project.
It seems like our regulations are for individual farmers on hog confinements and whatnot. And this is kind of a whole separate issue because it's a commercial operation, which usually are like this, two different on scale of how much is going on. So I
It'll be a
don't,
lot more than a
we keep
confinement.
referring back to agricultural.
It's not saying.
It's not the same, all right.
I just find it unusual that my understanding from our neighbors, and the reason nobody's here is everyone in our neighborhood had the same understanding as Mr. Seaman has, that the Thompsons were going to put it on their ground, and pretty much this project was on hold. That's what in our neighborhood we were believed. We were made to believe.
Yes.
Say that
That's the way I
again.
understood it too.
You were made to believe what?
That
They
a
were
man
gonna-
of farm was willing to put this on hold, and Thompsons were going to apply it to their ground. So the whole project, more or less, was on hold.
Okay.
That's what I was understood too, but I wanted to be here almost.
They
It's
didn't
something's on the
officially
agenda,
communicate that back to me after I talked to him yesterday, so.
Right,
He called
and
me
I was
about
in
3
Benton
o'clock
anyway.
yesterday.
Did what?
3 o'clock he called me.
3 o'clock, oh, okay.
He talked to you way earlier than that.
I just find it interesting he's not here to represent himself. That leads me to believe.
He kind of agreed with that too. So I'll make a motion and we'll table this.
Second.
How's that sound?
You don't get a third, so.
I know, but I, you know,
That's fine.
I just soon table it, you know, since we can't. I understood John was gonna call you last night or yesterday afternoon,
Yeah, he did.
okay? So we'll just, since I made the motion, you seconded
Is
it.
there a time frame on your tabling? Or are you just gonna table it and just keep pushing it down the road?
Well. I
You
cannot-
had said after
I cannot predict the
bean
weather
harvest.
when they get the beans out.
I just don't want this coming up week after week.
No, I figured we table it now and it ain't gonna come back on until,
It shouldn't come back until you decide for it to come back.
that's right,
Because somebody requested.
Right.
correct.
I guess I don't feel the urgency. I know they talked about the urgency that we're hanging a man of farms out, but to be honest, they made a business contract and they weren't prepared to fulfill that contract with the service. It's not our responsibility, our emergency, to push something when this is a major commercial issue. So that's why I would rather make sure we're all in agreement.
I think his concerns on time was because of fall and winter.
Yeah.
You know, they gotta get,
But that was the agree, I mean, they should have signed a contract to do that if they weren't prepared to store
And
it.
he's not here today to push that issue.
the Thompsons aren't here either.
Nope.
His concern on time was that he's got the tank bought. And you don't have a place to put it.
That's for planning, that's not our emergency.
And just one more point I'll make, fellas, I know there's a motion and a second on the table, but he has gone through all the hoops that we've asked him to. And he does have, he's done his due diligence. And smell and sight are not part of the ordinance, if you
It's the
will.
right to look
It's not
elsewhere.
on there, so, yeah. All right, so, I'm just making my point.
We'll vote on it.
There we go.
Aye. It's table now, somebody brings it up or this
So
fall.
then we need to keep looking at the agenda each Monday to see if it's on. I just need to know because I need to get time off from work, so I'd like to be prepared to know when to come. Because we
Can,
will not be notified because we're
can Joe
legally
Brewer be
outside of that.
notified and then she could, can we request that Joe be notified when it's gonna be on the agenda? And
Our public hearing notices are appearing in the Benton Live Wire now, if that's helpful to anybody. If you don't subscribe to the newspapers, the Benton Live Wire is carrying the county board's proceedings, and so it would
What,
be,
does that be in the agenda by 8:30 on Monday? Otherwise,
Monday,
it's
Fine.
9:59.
8:59.
24 hours.
Oh, and it's not on there, then I know.
Yeah,
Sometimes we called it 8:55.
Yeah, that's all, yeah.
Oh,
but I can't foresee it being on the agenda again until after they apply any of that stuff.
So after the beans are out, then start looking.
Unless somebody asks to have it put on there. because John could come up and ask us every week to put it on the agenda.
So you'll have to look, Joe, and let us know, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
We timed up pretty good.
Last week I didn't time it good.
There were more people here.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for listening to me, everybody.
Hey, Mark.
Take care, Barb.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Sorry that didn't, I don't understand that. 'Cause I didn't know he was gonna call me. And I was there till 4. So I never heard from him.
I did not sign in. Do you do that normally every? No.
When we have a group, we do, but
Okay.
since we only had 3 of you today, no.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
see ya.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Later.
That's more profit. Yeah. You got something for us, Sheriff? Or you just come to?
I come to listen to the, Humane Society.
Oh. Okay. How about reports? Nothing? Gary?
I had, regional mental health, and we're, did you get any, paperwork?
Yeah, I just did yesterday afternoon, so the 2018 is gonna be on next week's agenda. It's gonna revise it from the original one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did send it to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's on next week.
And we have all but 2 of our, current board members, resign. I think it's all but 2,
Really?
maybe 3, 2 or 3 of our board members are not gonna run for re-election. So we're gonna have a massive change.
Wow. And that is as of when?
Well, whenever the new supervisors,
After the election. But
yeah, it'll be January.
now's the time to have a change with all the way they're handling everything is all different now anyway, so at least they're gonna learn the new revised way.
No improved.
Our way's still better.
We're,
Their way.
We're not smoothed out. Once this first year maybe gets smoothed out again, it'll be a little better. Just figuring out how it's gonna work.
the scuttlebutt at the board is that it will go to the state and then it will come back to the counties. Because the state can't handle it.
Well,
There's,
after we built all of our new funds and everything.
Sure, after you empty the coffers and.
The state was shipped across the hallway here.
It was just like that service area amendment last week. They made this new implementation of this, but then they don't give us the full, how they want it handled and processed. It's frustrating.
and there's several areas in the state that are struggling, both in their management and in their monies. Des Moines has one county as their regional mental health, and they're always short money. It's a mess. They can't run it. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. And our region has been very fortunate in having conservative counties that have had a surplus of money. And I think we're doing a very good job of managing that money, where some of the other areas of the state are not doing so good.
Kind of the same scenario I hear at the juvenile detention meetings. There's one spot, I think we're talking about the same one, that keeps having money issues. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it'll take 10 years and I won't be here, so it won't be no big deal for me. But I think that we'll end up having it all back eventually. Pretty good prediction.
yeah, reports, Tracy.
No, and umpteen phone calls from different,
I was gonna say, so you had a quiet week.
no, I.
No, because if you guys were like what we got.
Yeah, I did not have any official meetings.
We need to take a 10-minute break.
Sure.
Motion that we
Second.
take a 10-minute break.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's screw that up. We'll just let it run.
You guys can just.
Yeah, you need to go to the bathroom, get a drink, or.
Yeah, got my own water. Oh, I'd like to go top it off. It's not in the hallway now.
Is that one here? Yeah.
It was empty last week.
Really?
Yep.
Is it just the one from Monkey Town? Somebody had to fill it probably.
Yeah, I don't know who does it.
Yeah, like what we do in the courthouse, the jugs are stored somewhere, so whoever took the last of the water is supposed to put the new jug on.
You're
They
right.
don't do it for you.
Well, I don't think the gals do that.
Paper?
I do it all the time.
Oh, do you?
Just lift it up and it has a little sticker, you open it and put it right on
Well,
top.
see, it's because you're a farm girl now.
You just gotta. Put your panties on again.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go get my cup.
Did we get this signed?
No, she's changing the
I gotta change the
numbers.
numbers, because Myron had resolutions before me.
Wrong number.
When I made those Friday for Kyle.
This. This don't have the right address on
He said the one letter he had messed up, but we have it right in the resolution.
It's making your job tougher too, isn't it?
What's that?
Oh, all this animal business.
He uses the calls, there's always something that gets somebody.
It's really not anything we can do about it. Not our deal.
Well, if it was in the city limits, but he's down.
Yeah.
But they contract law with us, so that's why our sheriff's office.
I was given this meeting count too, but we'll be out of here by 6:30.
Commissioner plan. You have to tell him to go around, probably.
You
we ought to move these meetings till after lunch. Because it's hot, and I can come in here and just sit.
I prefer to come over with.
And that, walk through alarm works.
Good.
Yeah.
See, that's a big one.
Don't wanna get too much, put some vodka in there.
And what is it?
Oh, I have a glass of water.
That's not the right size for vodka.
It's a shot glass.
Sorry, I tried
Okay,
so
well,
forcefully to
that's
go to the door.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't read.
Are you Weston?
I am, yeah. How are we doing today, guys?
How are you?
I brought you some additional information. I know I dropped off packets, but there's a couple more things in there.
Okay. You want this one back?
You can keep it.
All right.
Keep it.
Here you go.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Is it okay if I sit down with you guys?
Sure, please have a seat.
I can stand if you prefer. No?
Not quite your time though.
Oh, of course.
You're right. You're right.
Oh, get a better chair.
No.
We're gonna have to
What has
fill that
happened there?
Might be that one.
There we go.
You're on at 10 o'clock.
Perfect.
You need a new phone since you're still on the break. Doesn't show the time like my old one.
We'll run.
Because the screen's always touch it or something to make it show.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Mine's nice and good. Smart ass.
Yeah.
Lunch and season.
You broke your new one already?
What time is it?
That's bad.
It comes and goes.
Well, I had to get a new one because they're discontinuing service from my other one.
That's what happened to me too. I had a flip phone I loved, and then they're saying you can't basically use any flip phones anymore unless. Yeah,
Just got it.
I love it. Who you use? You a cellular?
Tracy would probably be okay if it quits working.
They probably gave me a tall story trying to sell me an expensive one.
Well, I've heard that.
Yesterday I dropped it pretty far and I was scared. It works.
My first phone was one of those Nokia brick phones, and I remember you could throw that off a building if you wanted. It was
They
fun.
can't take drive over with a truck though.
You know, they won't hold the family up, I can tell you that.
You had too hard on it, it was cement underneath, you gotta have dirt underneath.
Oh, I
and it
see.
just
So
pushes
just
it
drag
down.
it down.
The neighbor was filling the silage wagon up and then mixing it.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden he got in the tractor and like nuts. No phone. So they fed the cattle along the bunk. And got the hired man come out there and he said, call my phone. And they could hear it ringing. So they went through the silage and they found it. It was a flip phone. He lost the top part of it, the screen.
Mhm.
But it rained. That's what was amazing, how it got ground up,
Yeah.
busted in half. but
Still
yet it
working, huh?
rained. And they got to get all these contacts off it and everything, saved everything.
Do you have an extra one of these for the sheriff?
You know I don't, and I should have brought you one, but I can email you everything that's in there. I think you've gotten most of it.
You got pictures?
No, couple of new pieces of information in addition to what I'd sent previously, including a copy of a study from the Journal of American Veterinary Medicine.
Lost it?
No, I like the camera's working.
Yeah.
I must have lost it.
So if we get to a different page, Gary, I'll share with you when we get there. Otherwise, you have to roll with these.
And I'm not gonna like go page by page on all this stuff. I'm just gonna give you some of the highlights. I just wanted you all to have the full everything. I'm not gonna do that to you. A couple of these things are 17 pages long. We're not gonna do that.
You're not gonna read it word for word?
No. We don't need to do that to you today.
This is a city ordinance.
What's that?
We have no control over what goes on.
In Keystone, correct, yeah. But Benton County also has an ordinance, I believe, so.
I can't remember what number it is, but I think I sent it.
37.
Yeah.
It says 39 here.
39?
Yeah.
I had it printed off.
Yeah.
I had it printed off, and that's all got it home this morning.
Yeah, that is. It's folder here.
We close enough there? We got it.
Go back into session?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can motion to go back into session.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. That's
Good to go. Perfect. Thank you folks for letting me come in today. Before I get started on the specifics, I want to make sure you all have a little introduction to myself so you know who's here talking to you. Before I had this role, I worked at the Cedar Valley Humane Society for about 3 years. My first introduction to Benton County and to Benton was when we worked the Barbara and Marshall Galkowski case here in Benton, where they had about 800 guinea pigs and rabbits and et cetera in the basement. When I worked that case, I saw firsthand how law enforcement hands were typically tied when we came to animal cruelty cases, and how prosecutors' hands were tied. Even if folks knew that something was animal cruelty in our minds, the code didn't quite match that. And so I sought out a way to change that code, and that's what led me to the current role that I'm in. In 2020, we did change that law. I worked with members of the Iowa legislature and Governor Kim Reynolds, and we passed a new law that gave law enforcement and prosecutors quite a bit more tools, especially when we look at animal neglect and animal abuse cases. There were a couple really important upgrades to that code, including needing to provide veterinary care if an animal has an injury or serious illness. The animal abuse code was updated previously. An animal owner, a dog or a cat owner, was allowed to hit, kick, whatever your animal without any charges. And additionally, you could give someone else permission to do that. Pretty important stuff that needed upgraded, especially when we look at the link between animal and human violence. It helps keep communities safer. After that, I've had the good privilege of working with a couple of state agencies to put in some important upgrades to code that balance animal welfare, but also balance, I think, Iowa's values. The first one we worked on was with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. We adopted some new rules that made it easier for businesses to open, but also to protect people's pets. So those rules apply across the board to dog breeders, shelters, dog daycares, boarding facilities, what have you. Pretty baseline upgrades, I would say. Stuff that's not prohibitive for businesses, doesn't make it harder to run their businesses, just provides some protections for people's property, for their dogs and cats. The next thing I worked on, again, this I think mirrors Iowans' values pretty well, is we worked with the Department of Inspections and Appeals. That's the agency that inspects restaurants, bars, that sort of thing. We worked with them to make it easier for entrepreneurs to allow we made it easier for entrepreneurs to allow bars and restaurants to allow customers to bring their dogs on their patios if they wanted to. Not a mandate. It just allows restaurants and bar owners to operate the way they would like to. So again, removing some regulation and government mandates. And then just this year, we passed a really important bill that protects Iowa's tax dollars. I worked with Senator Dan Dawson out of Council Bluffs, as well as Representative Ann Meyer. She's from Des Moines metro area. And we passed a law that requires any research institution that does research on animals to provide an outlet for those animals to be adopted out, so that taxpayers aren't paying to just senselessly euthanize dogs and cats after research is done. this was important, you know, from our perspective, because it helps protect animals, get them into some new homes. But here in Iowa, it also protects our tax dollars. I don't think any Iowan is interested in having their tax dollars paid to euthanize dogs and cats. And in addition to all those bills, I've had the good fortune of working with communities all over the state. For our purposes today, I'm going to talk just about the upgrades we've made to different communities' dangerous animal ordinances. The upgrades that we have made do a couple of things. They help protect personal property rights so that folks here in Iowa have the right to get the dog that they believe is best for their family. And if they get a dog that happens to look like certain breeds that are prohibited in some communities, it allows folks to keep those animals as long as those individual animals haven't done anything wrong. I'm going to list a couple of communities that we've worked with. I've selected a couple that you're probably familiar with, but we've worked with a lot of small communities that, you know, even someone like me who's lived in Iowa my whole life didn't necessarily know. So we've worked with Albia, Sioux City, Anamosa, Muscatine, Maquoketa, Laurel, North Liberty, and LeGrand, Iowa are a couple of examples. And we worked with them because they previously had breed prohibitions or appearance prohibitions, which is what Benton County has. You have an ordinance that says if a dog looks like a pit bull, you're not allowed to have it. And so we worked with them on the local level, their city councils, their board of supervisors, but we also worked with their law enforcement to make sure that we were giving everyone the tools they needed to intervene if something did go wrong or if something looked like it might go wrong. And so that's something that you'll see in a lot of the documents that I provided. I provided a couple of good examples in studies about how these ordinances work. What we recommend is having multiple levels of classification so that if a dog behaves in a way that might be dangerous someday, might pose a risk, there are restrictions that communities can place on those families, on those dogs. They're required to post signage, possibly carry additional insurance, that sort of thing. And that's really based on those individual animals' behaviors. So say, you know, the mailman comes and dog bites. Well, okay, they were on their property, dogs bite, that happens, but maybe we need to consider them a potentially dangerous animal. Maybe children walk by and the dogs snap and snarl at them all the time. Maybe that's a potentially dangerous animal. And then if something, God forbid, does go wrong, an animal bites, an animal attacks someone, it provides the community a really sound way, legally speaking, to intervene and to say, hey, this is your property. In Iowa, we recognize people's right to own property, but your specific animal is causing a danger, posing a risk. So we worked with these cities to do this, you know, like I said, to protect personal property rights, but to put something really concrete and clear into code so that communities like you know the clear steps. Your citizens know the clear steps. There's an appeal process so that they can go through that if they want to, and then it ultimately leads to a decision being made by folks like you in conjunction with law enforcement. That's a whole lot of information about the stuff that I've worked on previously. I want to talk about some of the materials that I provided to you today and the reasons that I support breed neutral ordinances and my organization does as well. So in your packet, I provided a couple things. The first thing I want to talk about is the economic impact of these sorts of breed prohibitions. There's a really great economic impact study in your packet that was done in Overland Park, Kansas. Quite a bit bigger than Benton County, 200,000 people in this community, just for reference. But I think a lot of the stuff in here is still applicable to a community like Benton County. That study looked at the overall economic impact that a breed prohibition or a dog appearance prohibition has on their community. They looked at a couple of different things. The cost of enforcing the breed ban includes animal control and enforcement costs, so law enforcement, whatever agency you all have for animal control or any community has for animal control, expenses for kenneling those animals, veterinary care for animals, expenses related to euthanasia and carcass disposal, DNA testing costs, potential litigation costs. And for those organizations that assist with potential removals for some of these dogs, you have to look at, again, veterinary expenses for those organizations outside of what the city might have to pay, increased staffing for enforcement with those organizations, and the capital costs for those facilities. You end up having to hold animals for longer periods of time, just like you do for a cruelty case. If an ongoing case is in front of a judge, animals are evidence. You got to hold them there for some time. So it takes staff time, it takes building time, other resources. The direct impacts, though, for the community are pretty clear in that study. In Overland Park, over the period that they had their breed prohibition, they were able to measure and figure out that they lost about 100 full-time jobs. Additionally, when you look at the wages, there's all sorts of things in the community. They looked at job losses directly. They looked at people who wanted to move to the community but didn't because they had a dog that might be banned. People that moved away, families that sold their houses and moved away. And the figure is pretty staggering. Their breed ban cost that community more than $4 million in wages for the community. And then when you look at overall economic impact, we have to look beyond what people bring in for their money. You have to look at business growth. And the economic output that was hindered by this breed ban was measured to $8.5 million. So that's purchases, services, and overall business development and growth, new businesses that might move in, related to animal services or what have you. So the economic impact is pretty clear to me, I think. Obviously, Benton County is smaller than Overland Park, but I think the same figures can be applied here. The next reason that, again, I support breed neutral ordinances, and I think it's something that's emerging quite a bit in Iowa, is just the desire for most Iowans to have less government control in their lives. In the last few years, Iowa's leaders have spoken out pretty clearly about getting the government out of people's way, local and otherwise, state level, and getting rid of mandates that tell people how they have to live their lives. So right now, in a community like Benton County and in some of the communities here, you've got a situation where folks either have to get prior approval to bring a dog into their family, or potentially they have a dog in their family that, because of how it looks in Benton County, could potentially be considered a quote-unquote pit bull, and then they have to remove the dog. As part of these ordinances, again, we want to protect personal property rights while balancing safety. And in addition to just the ordinance change, the enforcement change, we've worked with communities around the state to make sure that it's more of a community-based effort. It's not just a new law. It's making sure that there are community discussions about what it means to be a responsible pet owner. It means that you're expanding access to care and other services people might need to keep their pets so that folks aren't letting them run around by themselves, potentially turning them loose. Increasing access to things like pet food banks so that folks don't have to lose their pet if they can't afford to feed it. And we don't do that by asking the communities to spend money on this stuff. We do it by encouraging public-private partnerships. I'll talk about Muscatine for a second because we've had good success there. There are a couple of communities there that have opened pet food banks, open emergency boarding facilities, so that if folks have to move, maybe veterans are getting deployed, maybe folks are escaping domestic abuse situations, they have a place to put their animals instead of just turning them into a shelter, instead of turning them loose. And those efforts really are keeping the community safer. In all of the communities that we've worked with, we haven't seen any sort of measurable increase in more pit bulls. We haven't seen any increase in dog bites or dog attacks. Every community will have some dog bites. That's just the way the world works. But there are ways that those communities are working to reduce those numbers and reduce terrible things that can happen in their community. The next thing I've included for you is a study from the Journal of American Veterinary Medical Association that studied the reason why dogs bite, especially in relation to dog bite related fatalities. And this is across the board, all sorts of breeds. There are all sorts of folks that like to cite figures related to quote unquote pit bulls and how they are alleged to be involved with an exorbitant percentage of dog bites. But those figures fail to look at the overall reason that dogs bite and what caused those things. I'm not going to read that whole study to you. I don't think that would be a good use of your time, but I do want to talk about some of the percentages that are in that study, and if you have questions about it when you read it, I'd be happy to dive further into the details. When we looked at 256 dog bite related fatalities, the absence of an able-bodied person to intervene in all those cases was 87% of those dog bites. There was no person, an adult, fully capable of adult, that was able to intervene. Incidents that had no familiar relationship between the victim and the dogs was 85% of the time, and owner failure to neuter those dogs, 84% of the time. Compromised ability for victims to interact with dogs appropriately, so children, people that are differently abled, that's 77% of the time when we had a dog bite related fatality. Dogs that were kept isolated from regular positive human interactions, so you think about folks, that have folks tethered, dogs tethered outside year round all the time, don't interact with folks, don't interact with the family, 76% was involved with these fatalities. Owners' prior mismanagement of dogs, so you look at animal neglect, at large animal, dogs running stray, 37% of the time. Owners' history of abuse or neglect of animals, 21% of the time. And when we look at all of those figures, 4 or more of those factors were in 80% of dog bite related fatalities. Additionally, within those, I want to talk about breed identification. For 401 dogs described in various media accounts, reported dog breed differed about 30% of the time. Folks, unless they have very extensive training, are not qualified to determine a dog's breed. Keystone is a good example. They require veterinary consultation. Here in Benton County, it's just about how it looks. It's a pretty subjective process. For 346 dogs with both media and animal control breed reports, you had about 40% differentiation between these cases. So again, just a wide, varied identification of dogs. Valid breed determination was only possible, and this was confirmed, veterinary DNA testing, 17.5% of the time. Overall, with all of these bites, 20 different breeds and mixes were identified. Unfortunately, what we see most often is certain headlines get more attention than others. If you think about all of the dog bites that happen in your community, how many times does a lab bite somebody and it doesn't get picked up by the news, by the paper? How many times does a border collie bite someone that doesn't get picked up by the paper? But nearly every time a dog that looks like a pit bull or any sort of these blocky head dogs bite, immediately the headline is pit bull attack. Most of these incidents are not attacks as we know it. I think that would be a word that shouldn't be prescribed to dog bite related incidents. Dogs don't plan to go out and hurt somebody, but dogs do bite. So I would really encourage folks to consider dog bites instead of dog attacks. So all of these things come down to the conclusion of that study, and it's that most of these incidents had all sorts of coincident, preventable factors that could have been taken into account to stop these dog bites from occurring or potentially stop them from occurring. And the study also says that breed is not one of the factors that should have been considered in this study. The next thing I want to talk about is law enforcement consideration. I don't think that it's a stretch to say that in the last few years, law enforcement has had a pretty tough go of things from a public perspective, and that includes Iowa's. Iowa's law enforcement agencies are a group of folks that I'm very proud to work with regularly. When we passed that cruelty code in 2020, a big part of my job became consulting with law enforcement with cruelty cases and consulting with prosecutors. Our agencies around the state are already overworked. They already have a full caseload, and the majority of Iowa law enforcement don't receive training in identifying dog breeds. I think that it's unfair to put law enforcement in these situations. law enforcement already has plenty of violent crimes and public safety concerns to address. And I can't imagine myself being put in a situation where I have to be sent to a home and say, you can't have your family dog anymore. I don't want that for our law enforcement officers or our deputies. And the Humane Society of the United States has been proud to work with law enforcement to implement and enforce these codes all around the state in a way that is breed neutral and based on animals' behaviors. I've also worked really closely with the Iowa Sheriffs and Deputies Association to advocate for dangerous animal laws that do make sense. Most recently, we worked with that organization and they endorsed the Big Cat Public Safety Act on the federal level. What that bill does is prohibit private ownership of captive wild cats like tigers, lions, mountain lions. And the reason we got so much support in that is because these animals really do pose a serious public safety risk. A couple of years ago in Zanesville, Ohio, a private owner of these animals was having some difficult life circumstances, and before he ended his life, he released 18 tigers, 17 lions, 8 bears, 3 cougars, 2 wolves, and a baboon into his community. And what that resulted in is the sheriffs and the deputy in that community having to go out and shoot a bunch of tigers and lions and bears. And that's not something that any law enforcement officer should be tasked with doing. It's not something that any of them want to do. Just last year, here in Iowa, we saw the Cricket Hollow Zoo close down after the courts ordered them to. They were ordered to surrender those animals to licensed sanctuaries so they could get the care they needed and to protect the community, but before they did, a number of animals went missing. Nobody knows where these animals are. That included a couple grizzly bears and mountain lions. They're still missing today. For all of those reasons, we're really proud to stand with the Iowa Sheriff's Deputies Association and other law enforcement around the state to enact really good, common sense animal laws, dangerous animal codes, so that folks can be protected in a better way. The next thing that I would like you to consider is expert organization and expert professional support for breed neutral dangerous animal codes. I'm here today, of course, representing the Humane Society of the United States. We have an expert policy team in almost every type of animal topic that you can think of. We have a very strong track record here in the state of implementing community-friendly, citizen and private property owner-friendly, and highly effective animal-related laws and ordinances. Other national organizations like the ASPCA, Best Friend Animal Society, and all sorts of others recommend breed-neutral animal laws. And of course, these are animal organizations, right? So you would think, well, sure, the national organizations support that. Closer to home, here in Benton, we have Better Together Rescue. They also support breed-neutral animal laws. And for your purposes here, I'm going to list off a couple of organizations from around the state, from nearby communities, that also support breed-neutral and oppose breed-specific and appearance-specific prohibitions. The Cedar Valley Humane Society in Cedar Rapids, which I believe handles Benton County animal control and impoundment still. The Cedar Bend Humane Society in Waterloo. I mentioned Better Together here in Benton. Wild Thunder Rescue and Rehab in Independence. Agape Fosters in Rhinebeck. Diamond in the Rough Rescue in Tama County. The Animal Rescue League of Marshalltown. Animal Welfare Friends in Monticello. Safe Haven of Iowa County. Friends of the Animals in Tipton. I could go on, but to do that I would need to list almost every animal shelter, rescue, and animal control organization in the state. In addition to the animal shelters and rescues, because again, of course, you think, well, the animal folks, of course. There are a couple other groups that aren't animal shelter focused that also oppose breed-specific legislation and appearance-specific legislation. They include the American Kennel Club. Every single one of Iowa's dog breeder and dog show clubs and organization oppose these types of ordinances. The American Bar Association opposes it. The National Animal Control Association opposes it. The National Veterinary Medical Association and the Iowa Veterinary Medical Association. The United States for Disease Control and Prevention. The National Canine Research Council. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. and the U.S. Department of Justice, to name a couple, all oppose this type of ordinance because they're ineffective in doing what you all set out to do, protect the community and potentially prevent these sorts of dog bites. The final consideration I would like you all to consider is the direction that our state is headed. I mentioned earlier the overall support from the vast majority of Iowans to reduce government mandates, to get the government out of our lives and let folks make the decisions they think is best. In 2021, I worked with Republican State Senator Chris Knoyer and Democrat House Minority Leader Jennifer Converse. Both of those legislators filed legislation that would require cities and counties to adopt comprehensive dangerous animal codes based on documented behaviors instead of breed or appearance. That bill stalled because there were other legislative priorities, but I've talked with plenty of the folks that were involved that year, and they're still supportive of that effort. In 2022, 3 different state legislators filed similar legislation. Unfortunately, this year, that bill was also sidelined, primarily because there were a lot of really focused efforts from Iowa legislators and from the governor's office, primarily the school choice bill. That was their priority this year. However, even though it didn't pass, support from legislators on this issue is growing. Just this week and last week, I've talked with 3 or 4 folks from the surrounding counties that are not pleased with what they're hearing about, with folks' family dogs potentially getting removed from their families. In the vast majority of Iowans, the last time I checked these figures, about 90% of Iowans live in communities with no breed-specific legislation. And even so, these communities from all over the state have seen no measurable increase in dog bites or dog attacks related to specific breeds or suspected breeds. There's been no increase in supposed bad actors moving to these communities with dangerous animals. The majority of Iowa residents currently live in communities where their personal property rights are protected. They live without government interference in their lives with regard to choosing the dog that they believe is best for their family. By continuing to uphold the breed and appearance prohibition here, Benton County and its communities are placing themselves at a competitive disadvantage over other Iowa's communities. As I've outlined, you have a disadvantage to these communities in relation to job growth. You have a disadvantage related to population growth, to revenue growth, and to housing development growth. At a time when many of Iowa's rural communities are shrinking and having difficulty attracting new families and new workers, Benton County, I believe, would be better served by adopting a breed-neutral ordinance based on animal behaviors instead of the way they look or their breed. In conclusion, I'm here today to strongly urge the Benton County Board of Supervisors to immediately suspend enforcement of your appearance-based prohibition ordinance. And instead, I would love the opportunity to work with you all. Our legal team is ready. Our policy team is ready to assist Benton County and the communities throughout the county with implementing breed-neutral ordinances so that folks can have the dog that they believe is best for them without fear of their dog being seized for no cause. That's a lot of information for you. I appreciate you letting me read through it. I think the evidence is pretty stacked, quite frankly, in favor of breed-neutral ordinances and ordinances based on undocumented behaviors. I'd be happy to answer any questions if folks do have them. Otherwise, I'd be happy to make myself available anytime outside of this meeting to discuss with all of you, with members of your department, Sheriff, to see what ways we can move forward for the county.
Do you refer to your legislative House bill number? Do you know what number that was?
Okay, so 2021, I believe it was Senate File 143, and I believe it was House File 59. This last year, I don't recall the bill number, but I can send it to you, House File 20-something.
Okay. That's fine. I can look those up too.
Sure.
They're just not fully through, so.
Yeah, that's correct. And I can send that to you. When I get home, I'll look that up.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just nice to have them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How many counties still have ordinance like we have?
I believe Benton County is one of only a handful of counties.
Really?
There are plenty of communities, not that many. Like I said, about 90% of Iowans live in communities and counties that do not have a breed ban. We're looking at about 10% of Iowa's population that live in communities that have this sort of thing.
So Lynn County, they have adopted something.
Lynn County has a pretty decent ordinance regarding dangerous animals. It's breed neutral, based on behaviors. Outside of the county situation, I mean, locally, you've got some good examples. North Liberty, Iowa has a very good ordinance with multiple layers, multiple levels of classification, and they're using it pretty effectively. There was a case not too long ago where a family with a dog, I think, was snapping through a fence or something, and they immediately took action. They worked with that family. They designated that dog as a potentially dangerous animal. They now have signage. They're carrying extra insurance. There are common sense things that can be done to help notify the public that this is a place that could potentially be a problem. And they've spoken with that family, and if there is a problem, they intend to remove it.
We got a lot of information here that he's given us,
Yes, he does.
Really need to have some time to digest this stuff,
Absolutely.
And before you leave,
Mhm.
I'd like to get your contact information. I know I've got you got the card or
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. I know it's kind of a funny phone number. That's the number they gave me, so I'm sure, that's fine, but I am in Cedar Rapids. I'd be happy to.
That's your card here.
Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, you got
In your file. You have one in your file.
You know what, I think when I first started, I very smartly went through a bunch of folders and put my card in them preemptively.
on the one
Yeah.
previously, but the updated one, not. I'm sorry.
I apologize about that. You got an extra one now. You can hand it out to some
Well, there you
friends. They're
go.
like trading cards, right?
Sure.
Additionally, something I didn't talk about, sort of related to the dangerous animal thing, but all sorts of other topics. Sheriff, we have a really great law enforcement training center, and we've brought trainings to Iowa before. The most recent one was in Ottumwa, and that's kind of updating law enforcement on new cruelty code, new investigation tactics and methods. And that's not just me standing up and talking. We bring sheriff deputies from around the country and usually from a similar community so that they can talk about similar problems they're facing. That's at no cost. We would be happy to bring something like that to Benton County if there's an interest.
We like free, don't we?
I like free. Free is always good. And what's great about those is we can get registered for continuing ed credits for your folks too.
But it's gonna take some time to go through this stuff.
Absolutely.
And so as we go forth, if we have questions, we can contact
Please do.
Preston if I may go that route.
Yeah.
And so, I appreciate you coming forth.
I appreciate the time.
Lynn County has one.
I'm sorry.
Lynn County has the newer revised one.
They have a breed neutral ordinance. I think that as we continue this work, and as I believe the legislature will enact this legislation, whether it's next year or in the next 5 years, we do have some work to do around the state. Not every county, not every city has this multiple level classification standard. We're committed to working with folks on that. We know that it's the right public policy move. We know it's effective. We know it gives law enforcement tools that they need, and it gives cities and counties the tools that they need to take steps if they need to. So I'm not as familiar with what Lynn County's ordinance says with regard to that classification and the process, but I could send you some good examples of one. I know Sioux City, when we worked with them, they adopted this strong multiple level ordinance. North Liberty, like I said, has one. The most recent one we worked on was down in Muscatine, Iowa, and they adopted a pretty good ordinance with multiple levels as well. So, not every ordinance is perfect, but the vast majority of them don't take breed or appearance into consideration.
It looks like there's an ordinance number 29.
There's,
Yeah, so I'll try to get that. You guys can.
And I'd like to reach out to some of our other associates at other counties, other supervisors that have made acquaintances with, and see what they've got.
Yeah.
get copies.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel.
No, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do that. We can certainly help, kind of piece together different policies. I didn't include this in the information, but I'm thinking of it now. So the Association of Iowa Counties, whatever that group is, Iowa Association of Counties, they also recommend breed neutral ordinances for their members, along with the Iowa Department of Public Health. They recommend the same thing.
So there may be some with ISAC. So, perfect. Well, thank you.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. I know I'm a little long-winded, but I wanted to get as much information to you as possible. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Let me know if you want to talk about any of those trainings. I've got like a menu that we can pick through, and we can get our team working with you on that. Okay? Thanks, folks.
Ask for the county's ordinance right now. I don't think
Okay, good enough.
Anything else, sir?
I don't believe so.
Well, in that case, I'd make a motion that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.